Welcome, fellow researchers. My name is Nancy Lundgren, and I am a researchaholic. I do family history research an average of 2 to 4 hours a day, and on a really lucky day, I get 6 hours in like I did yesterday. I've had tremendous success using primarily 4 websites. It's rare that I venture beyond these 4 websites. You see, it's not so much where you look as how you look. Today I will share with you how I look for sources and how you can find more success in your search too. So family history is supposed to be easy, right? It's a hobby. Lots of people do it. Well, it usually goes more like this. I'm going to share with you a clip from Who Do You Think You Are? With Paula Deen as the guest.
Because John Paul would be 10 years old. Let's get the computer and
okay. And you're going to help me with this, aren't you? Because, look, I don't even know how to open it too much. All right. I'm going to have to put on my little cheaters.
Okay, I've got those too.
To be able to see.
We're going to Ancestry.com, the census and voter list.
So we're going to 1870?
Right.
So we want to type in John Paul. He lived in Lee County.
Correct. Okay. Now, I think we've got John Paul here.
He was 11 years old.
Right. And
he lived over here.
In the household of John Vance.
Bats, that was my great-great-grandmother's maiden name.
Right. As on the
death certificate.
So right now, it's pretty clear that John Vance could be a relative of John Paul.
Is there any way we can find out why John Little was living with the Bats?
I think what we need to do next is look for his parents. We're going to look for W.B. Paul.
WB, there he
There's
is.
WB. Let's just print this out, and we can take both 1870 census records and study them.
Okay, so that's how it usually goes. Someone logs on to Ancestry.com for the first time ever. She can't even get her laptop open by herself. But boom, immediately finds her ancestor. In reality, family history is more like this. Okay, let's see. What is that? Looks like a bowling ball and a stick. No. It looks more like an amphibian being chased by a snake. I can't figure this out. Well, Henry Louis Gates Jr., who is the host of Finding Your Roots on PBS, a similar show to Who Do You Think You Are, was asked a question once. Sometimes television makes genealogy research appear quick and easy. That can feel frustrating to those of us with long-standing brick walls on our trees. What would you say to that? He replied, quote, each of these stories takes months to research, unquote. In other words, it takes professional genealogists months to research a line. It's not an easy look-see. It's a true search. And then it's a research. Research and more research. We're not just looking for perfect, easy matches, of which there are very few. We're looking for the right matches even when they have incorrect information and errors in them. So how many of you remember the old Flintstones cartoon? I used to love to watch it because of what they did with the animals. For instance, a large bird was an airplane. They had a crab as a lawnmower. An octopus, I remember, as a dishwasher. And for a TV, they had a rabbit, rabbit ears. So do you remember what they had the monkey doing? Well, I happen to know that the monkey was the stop sign. In my mind, though, I envision two monkeys inside the computer. And when I input a question or information that I'm looking to find, those monkeys start scurrying around trying to find the right answer to give back to me. So keep that in your mind about these monkeys, because I'm going to use that reference several times in the next little bit. So today I want to talk about 10 tips for better research. Number 1, manipulate the input. I use Family Search as my base, so that's how I'm going to demonstrate my techniques today. However, these techniques will work in any search engine with a little modification. As this is Family History Research 201, I'm going to assume that you already have experience with basic research. So there are 3 critical areas of information to manipulate: name, birth date, and birthplace. If any of these is inputted incorrectly, it could derail your research. When you put information into a search engine, the monkeys have no other choice but to search for the entire content of what you have inputted. We want to keep it clean, streamlined, and focused on what we want to find. And this is where we do all our magic. First of all, too much information is going to confuse the monkeys. Here we've got Harry Thomas Paul, who was born in North Dakota, married in Washington, and died in Alaska. All this info is important in our search, but should be stored in other places and then pulled out as needed for research. I'll show you that you will get different results with the amount of information that you input. Here we have Solomon Weisenthal, and he was born and married and died in Ohio. But all that information is right there, and when I inputted that, this is what I got. This was the result I got. When I cleaned it up a little bit and only left his birthplace and birth year range, this is what I got. Entirely different options than the first. So you can see it by just cleaning up and manipulating the information that you input, you can get a totally different set of options to choose from. One of the things that we need to manipulate are names. Names are often misspelled. Consider who's providing the information. Family members who may be illiterate, or they may be non-English speaking. City clerks, hospital workers, funeral home staff, census recorders. I just saw a death certificate earlier today where the informant was a brother-in-law. And I thought to myself, if my brother-in-law, one of my brothers-in-law, had to inform about me, could they do it? I don't think they'd have the right information. So you have to remember that there are a lot of errors because the informants may not know the answers. So often these names are misspelled because the people don't know how to spell them correctly. And the monkeys don't know how to spell names correctly either. So if I want to look, and these are names that can be different. So if I want to look for Thomas Stephen Smith, these are all the different ways that I should be looking for him. I don't just put in Thomas Stephen Smith and call it good whatever I find. I need to manipulate the name and try to bring up different records that might be under these different ways of writing his name or ways of spelling his name. For example, I was trying to find Lilburn Bourne. I inputted his name as such, and the monkeys found absolutely nothing for me. Then I manipulated his name and found in 1850, found him under Lillian Bond, under 1860, Silburn Bown, and in 1870, Lilbum Bum. None of these sources popped up when I simply inputted his name as he spelled it. But with manipulation, I was able to find these 3 critical census records. That's what manipulation can do for your research, and I'll show you more real soon. Now, with women's names, you need to look for them as single women with their maiden name, and by each of their married surnames. Sometimes there's a lot to consider. If I still can't find the source I'm looking for, I look at the birthplace. And often the birthplace is a guess by a previous researcher or a family member. So if I can't find what I'm looking for by inputting the birthplace, I will leave it off. And instead, I will put it in the residence section. That way, the monkeys will know to look for him living in, say, Pennsylvania, but not necessarily born in Pennsylvania, and that will open the window a lot more. Now, for birth dates, we have the option of widening the birth allowance on each end. Here is Esther Hickok. She was born between 1822 and 1826. And when inputted into the computer, nothing came up. But I widened her name on the end to 1829, just adding 3 years, and up pops the 1850 census record. Keep in mind that your information may actually be correct. You're simply manipulating your correct information to find the match that may have incorrect information. So if you input a name and come up with no matches, that is a very good indication that either the name, birthplace, or birth date is incorrect. You need to work on some more manipulation. Okay, so let your resources prove your research. The monkeys cannot determine what is true, and neither can the observer unless there is documentation. Undocumented information can be useful, and often it's a great clue. It might even be correct, but I don't believe it until I see a source. So document all your sources, and do so in a way that other researchers can easily access it by attaching a link or a copy of a photograph. Okay, be cautious in adding your hunches. For example, in this marriage record, this was on Family Search under an individual's personal page. There are 4 sources. None of them are documented. They're all just hunches. And so I would immediately feel compelled to clean this up. I would get rid of the 3rd hunch because it's a duplication. I would see what age the oldest child is to see if they were born before or after 1836. If they were born before, I would get rid of the last option. And then I would do research in both Pennsylvania and Connecticut until I could verify that one of those dates was accurate, and then get rid of the other one. And then I would leave documentation to prove it so that no one else would have to do that kind of research again. In this record, there's several things going on. There's hunches. The hunch is that she was born in Illinois and that she died in Illinois around 1866. And the name is all messed up. I would clean that up. I would get rid of Mrs. I would put Levi Carnegie back down under husbands, a list of husbands, and I would leave just Mary up there. And then when I inputted it, I would put Mary Carnegie. But too many hunches like this and too many extra names and words are just going to really mess the monkeys up. They're not going to be able to find what you're looking for. And then this one, Ransom Hubbard. When I was asked to research his name, the only clue there was a hunch that he was born in 1866 in Placerville, California. After the research, I found that he was actually born in 1816 in Watson Lewis, New York, but he lived in Placerville, California in 1866. So it was a good clue, but it wasn't the correct information. And now this can be documented and proven. Okay, number 4. Never abbreviate. The monkeys don't know the abbreviations for states and countries, and evidently many of us don't know either. If I gave you the test, the top 2 lines there, could you figure those out? Well, many of us couldn't either, so just never abbreviate. Keep in mind that many people who are using these genealogical websites aren't from America and don't know the abbreviations either. Also, correct spelling is critical. The 3rd line, Kent, Illinois, Sullivan, Indiana, the next line. Abbreviations like that just make us guess, and sometimes we guess wrong, and it leads to some wrong information. And so it's just best to write it out and to look up the county if we don't know what it is. It's so easy to do that. Spelling is also critical, because if you try to find a source in Connecticut and you spell it Cinnecticut, the monkeys aren't going to send you to Connecticut. It's going to be some other place. They don't know what you're asking for. Some search engines are more particular than others. Find a Grave, for instance, is very particular, and if you misspell a name, the monkeys won't be able to find it for you at all. I want to show you how names spelled slightly differently can bring very different results. But first, I want you to notice the last word on this list, cemetery. Notice how it's spelled, because I'm going to mention it again in just a minute. So Joseph Yonker, spelled Y-O-N-K-E-R. I inputted him like this with just his birthplace and birth date and came up with these different options. Then I added a U to his last name, Y-O-U-N-K-E-R, and came up with a completely different set of options using the same birthplace and birth date. That tells you how much the spelling of a name can make a difference in finding the information that you need, and how we often have to manipulate the name in order to see what kind of options we can come up with. Also consider the phonetic spelling and pronunciations of the foreign language of the country of the ancestor that you're studying. Daniel Yutzi was the son of Christian Yutzi. The last name is pronounced the same. However, in Germany, where Christian was born and raised, the J letter is pronounced with a Y. And in America, where Daniel was born and raised, he Americanized the name so that it sounded, the first letter of his name sounded like it sounded, Yutzi, with a Y. And so if you don't do your research with both spellings, you're going to miss out on some good clues. Okay, here's the thing about cemeteries. According to the rules and regulations of official family history research, if you do not spell cemetery correctly and you spell it with an A, you are automatically disqualified to research. I'm sorry, that's just the way it goes. 3 E's in cemetery. Try to remember that. We don't want you to be disqualified. All right, number 7, watch for red flags. So names are more common than you think. For instance, take Isaac Teichensberger. Not a common name, but all 7 sons of Isaac named their firstborn after their father, and most of those Isaacs lived and died within 30 miles of each other, and were roughly the same age. They were a nightmare to figure out. Though an unusual name, it would be very, very easy to confuse them all. Dexter Willoughby, also an unusual name. In a town just over from him lived another Dexter Willoughby, completely unrelated. And remember that slaves were often named after their masters and lived in the same region. Easy to mix them up as well. Mary Elizabeth Peckett she died in March of 1920. The hunch was that she was born in 1781, but that's a red flag. That doesn't make sense. Furthermore, She had the good fortune of nabbing a husband 18 years before he was born. Red flag. When you see red flags like this, it's going to take a little more research to figure them out. One family that I recently researched had 8 children. A previous researcher had 7 of them born in Portsmouth, Rhode Island, with the middle child born in England. Red flag. Hugh McIntyre, born 1850 in Pennsylvania. On his record, a researcher attached a christening record 1819 in Scotland. Red flag. If that happened now, we wouldn't necessarily think it was a red flag, but in 1815, 1819, people weren't going back to their homelands just for the christening or for any other reason for that matter. Eula N. Carpenter. She died in 1980, but according to this cemetery record, she was buried in 1931. Red flag. Or possibly a really bad marriage. Jabez Welton. Can you find the red flag? Good job. You caught that his oldest son was not born in 1717, or maybe that's not his oldest son, but that person does not belong there. Okay, so the next thing, number 8, is Wildcard. When searching for a hard-to-find name, you can use a wildcard, which is an asterisk placed somewhere in their last name, so that the search engine will search for whatever letters you leave, plus everything else they can find. For example, I couldn't find an 1850 census record for Justice Hickok. I could tell by the other census records that he was likely in Sullivan County, New York in 1850, but no record seemed to exist. I looked for his youngest son, Charles, who was born in 1844. He would have been on the 1850 census record. Again, could find nothing. So then I used the wild card, using a last name of H.I. with the asterisk, with Sullivan, New York as the residence. There he was, only he was Charles Hitchcock, and his father was Gustus Hitchcock, but it was in Sullivan County, New York. If I had tried to look for his father, Justus, I never would have found him. I never would have thought to look under Gustus. And had I used the wild card and placed the asterisk any other place except for after the H.I., I wouldn't have found him either. So my personal thought is that it's better to put it closer, just use a couple letters. You can always try something else and move it down the line a little bit later. The other option is this. If nothing had come up for him here, I could have tried searching for Charles in Sullivan, New York, without a last name. I don't know that I would have found anything with Charles, and you'll never find anything with names like John, Anna, Mary, the really common names. But I could have found something possibly under his father, because Justus is a less common name, except for the fact that here he was Gustus, and I wouldn't have found that. So that's what you do. You get to play and manipulate the information that you do have, that you know is correct, and that will help you find the information that you're looking for. Number 9. Be careful with some documentations. For instance, Social Security Death Index has their birth date as being November 1891, and right below it, State Washington. That is not the state where they were born. That was the state where they were at the time that the card was issued. Now, it's a good clue. They obviously lived there, and he may have been born there, but it's not necessarily his birthplace. Also, in military records, if you look down at the bottom, the birth date is 1944. Residence place is Oregon. That was where he lived at the time that he enlisted. And so, again, a good clue. He certainly lived there. He might have been born there, but do not assume that he was born there. Number 10. If the monkeys should give you some hints, for instance, in Family Search on the Person page, on the right top section, there's a place that if they find any probable matches, they can list them for you. When and if they do this, do not assume that it is a match. Look into it first. Double check it. Click on it and scroll through and make sure it's a match before you document it. Also in Family Search, in Ancestry.com, the top 6 to 10 sources that are pulled up after you input your name are more probable matches. However, that does not mean that they are automatically a match. You need to look into each source, and do your homework before you determine that it is a match or not. So those are my top 10 tips for finding sources better and easier, and those tips have made all the difference in the world. So much so that I have not needed to venture out to any other websites to find this kind of information. So the 4 websites that I primarily use, again with great success, using the techniques that I've demonstrated, are FamilySearch.org. It's an easy website to work. It's an easy website to manipulate. And I love keeping my information on it. You can organize it easily. It's just a great place. Ancestry.com. I like Ancestry because it provides a broader search and often brings up clues that I cannot find in Family Search and gives me some ideas to go with. I also like MyHeritage.com. It provides easily accessible family collections. They're often undocumented, but they're great clues. And I've gotten a lot of good information from there. And the last one is findagrave.com, which is just a gem. Again, you need to make sure your spelling is accurate on both locations and names, but you can have great success finding information there. One other that I might have added, but now don't need to, is newspapers.com, which is growing in size, and they have copies of newspapers over the country and over time. However, they've made some sort of a contract with Ancestry.com, and they're showing up there, and so you don't need to purchase and pay money to get into that website or even add it to the list. But that's a wonderful resource as well. So when I say that it's rare that I venture beyond these 4 websites, I mean that it's rare that I have to document the basic chronological timeline of an individual. Other websites can be very useful to fill in the timeline with detailed life histories, with photos, newspaper clippings, military records, etc. All of which you can do and will want to do once you find the person that you're looking for in the first place. And these techniques will help you find your lost people and help you break through those brick walls and improve your research incredibly. With that, I wish you happy researching and hope to see you all next year when we can actually meet in person. Bye-bye.